of the Listen, Learn, and Act initiative, Conversations That Matter. We are here to talk about Women's History Month, and we are joined by a fantastic panel today of some UAA administrators, coaches, former past student athletes, and I'm going to let them introduce themselves quickly before we jump into the discussion. Serena, would you like to introduce yourself first, please?
Hello, I'm Serena Lamar, currently Director of Basketball Operations here at the University of Florida with women's basketball. I started here as a student manager way before all of you were born, just kidding, 17 years ago. And then for the past 10 years, I've served in this role.
Thanks, Serena. Veronica?
Sure, Veronica Meinhardt, and I'm a former swimmer at UF. Great years. I was there 88 through 92, and really remained close to the university for the following 22 years in the field of fundraising, and spent some of my time focused on fundraising and athletics. And that's the path I took, specific to sports and the advancement field. Originally from Caracas, Venezuela. So I say that I swam across the Caribbean, and UF greeted me with open arms. But anyway, thrilled to be part of this great panel, currently at Ohio State University.
Thanks, Veronica. Linda?
Good afternoon, Linda Teeler, Executive Associate Athletic Director here at Florida, and I have been here for 18 years. So Serena even predates me maybe by just a few days, but happy to be part of this panel.
Thanks, Linda. Amber?
Hi, I'm Amber McCray, and I'm a forever Gator. Was blessed to play volleyball there from 2003 to 2007, and then worked there for 3 years in women's administration under beautiful Miss Linda Taylor. And I'm currently the head coach at Louisiana Tech University. So thrilled to be on this panel amongst all of these legends.
Thanks, Amber. Becky?
Hi, everybody. My name is Becky Burley, and I am the soccer coach at the University of Florida until Saturday. And I have been here since 1994, long time.
Thanks, Becky. Kim?
Hi, everybody. I'm Kim Green. I am currently the Associate Athletics Director for Compliance. I started here in 1992 as a graduate assistant in academics, and 29 years later, I'm still here and loving every minute. Happy to be a part.
Thanks, Kim. And finally, Mary.
Bringing up the eldest role, Mary Wise, now my 30th year as the head volleyball coach at the University of Florida, which means I predate everybody, even Becky, by a couple years.
Thanks, Mary. And my name's Denver Parler in the communications department. I'll be helping facilitate the discussion today. I want us to get started. Let's just talk about what was a formative experience for you early in your career as a woman working in sports, and how has that influenced you in your approach throughout your career? Amber, can you start us off?
Yeah, so my formative experience, particularly having to deal with coaching, actually deals with the conversation I had with you, Mary. A couple of years ago, I flew in to coach Gator camp. And at that time, I had been at my junior college for a total of 8 years. I was very comfortable there and had really zero desire to coach Division I volleyball. Had some opportunities and calls to be able to do so as an assistant, as a head coach, but I was very adamant about taking that step. And Mary started talking to me about it, trying to kind of figure out my reasons. And ultimately, it all came down to family. I told her, I eventually want to have, be the wife, be the mother, have a family and all of that, and be there. And I just don't know if I can do that coaching Division I. And I'll never forget her response, because she was just basically like, why not? Just real nonchalant of why can't you do both? Why, what would stop you from doing both? And it was such a simple response, but hit me just like a huge whoa moment, because I realized here I am talking about the limitations of coaching at a Division I program and having a family, and I'm talking to a woman who is legendary, one of the most legendary to ever do it in our sport, who is a wife and a mother and now a grandmother, and who has done all of those things and done it at the highest level. And it just made me feel really silly, for one, for even thinking that way and even letting that kind of be something that limited myself, because she just basically said, you can have it all, you can do both. Please just tell me you won't limit yourself, essentially. And I just think that was so huge for me, because I really used that as a reason of why I didn't want to take the next step in my career. And I think, unfortunately, too often, that's the reason a lot of people have, a lot of women in this field have. And I think we have things that have unfortunately led people to feel that way, or led people to believe that we have to choose, when we never ask men to choose. We never ask men coaches. They don't worry about how can I be a great coach and father. I mean, some of them do, there's time in the office, but we don't put that pressure on them or that ultimatum like we do with women in sports. And I think just having that conversation with her opened my eyes to so much. It was just a few months later that this job opportunity opened up at Louisiana Tech, and I took it. And I wouldn't have taken it without that conversation with her. So once again, as she has so many times in my life, Mary, you changed my life. Thank you.
Wow, that's an incredible story. Thanks so much, Amber, for sharing that. Serena, how about you?
Well, this goes back to when I was actually a student manager. I remember just driving one of our recruits and their parents from Lake Alice, and the father told me to pull the car over, and I'm like, oh, whoa, why? And so he's grilling me and asking me a bunch of questions about, Florida, why I loved it here, and all these different things. And then fast forward 4 years later, she graduates and she has, a little shindig, and her dad asked me to come to the front, and he's telling everybody why I was the big reason for, his daughter choosing to come to school here. And I'm like, me, like I probably did a great job cleaning her clothes and stuff for the past 4 years, but I don't know what else I would have done. But it just reminded me at that time, back then, that, conversations and relationships and how you treat people really does matter. And at the time, I was just a student manager. I didn't really think that a golf cart ride up the street would have been that impactful on a student athlete choosing, the University of Florida. But it just goes back to, how, we preach to the student managers here now. And I think about, myself, like, we need to be cognizant of how we treat people, because it could really, really, really go a long way. And so if I could ask that father again, or if I had his number, I would ask him what exactly I said, because I might need to write it down. It might help us in the future. But yeah, those things, that's one thing that really, really hit home with me, and it resonated with me.
Wow, that's an incredible story. Thanks, Serena. Becky, how about you?
Well, I think in terms of like aha moments in my career, there's been a lot of them for sure. But I think, it's probably been when somebody that you don't even really know that you've made an impact on lets you know that you've made an impact on them. And that's happened to me recently a lot with the announcement of my retirement. I've had a lot of, especially younger women coaches, even people I don't know directly, like maybe I've sat next to them at a recruiting event, or had some tangential relationship with them. And I think that it sort of speaks to what Serena just said about how you don't know how you're going to impact someone, even if it's not a direct impact, if they just can see that you are doing things in a certain way, and then they can take cues from that. So I think she's right. You just never know.
Thanks, Becky. Want to open it up in case I don't want to miss anybody before we move on to our next question. Was there anything else on this topic here before we move ahead?
Yeah, Denver, I'll chime in. I remember a conversation I had early on in my career when I had a conversation with a supervisor and just asked if there were any opportunities for growth. and was basically told that, you know, you're really kind of at the ceiling. So if you're looking for a true job opportunity or to grow, you probably need to find it in another organization. And so you think about that and said, no, you love a place, you don't want to leave. You just have to keep working towards it. And it's amazing, but your talents will make room. And so you just don't give up. And when opportunities avail themselves, if you prepared yourself, you go for it. And I'm still here. So so sometimes it may seem like, you know, you're hitting your head against the ceiling, but you keep perfecting your craft, and your talent will make room for you.
Thanks, Kim. All right, we'll move on to our next question here. And what do you all wish that more people knew or understood about the experience of women working in sports? And in particular, what ways is the experience of Black women in sports unique? Linda, can you start us off there?
Sure. So, and I think this past year really highlighted this for me. And, you know, when you are a woman in this business, you're often sort of understood to be sort of the voice of the gender, right? So anyone in college athletics, if you're a woman, you should have a handle on all the issues, every aspect of that, what it means, and be an advocate. And then in the last year, when we're dealing with these social justice issues that have really come to the forefront, I think Black women have also then been presumed to now have this role of leader, educator, mentor, to be, even if this is not something that is maybe has been a particular focus of yours or an area where you feel particularly schooled. And I think it's just the recognition that there are women in this business, particularly Black women, who, and again, in this last year, it's been really highlighted, that are serving in this sort of advocate, educator role. And I feel like it's, to a certain extent, has let people off the hook, right? So women are not the only ones equipped to speak to women's issues in athletics. I would hope that anyone that is a part of college athletics would be able to speak to and advocate for women in the business. The same for issues of social justice and racism. We all should equip ourselves in that way. You know, I often say, you know, like, read a book, watch a documentary, you know, talk to someone. You know, I think too many people have for a long time had this out where I'm not a member of X community, but I've got this person here, nice and handy, who can speak to all the women's issues, all the racism issues. And there's an element of really that's fatiguing in a lot of ways. And so I think that's really just been highlighted last year. And, you know, so for me in particular, I'm not a member of the LGBTQ community, but it is still my responsibility to understand the challenges, to advocate, to be informed, particularly when we have student athletes and staff who are members of the community, and we need to be a part of supporting them. And I would say, you know, one of the challenges is just stepping back from that educator advocate role and challenging other people to step to the forefront, not always having to be the Black woman voice in the room.
Wow. Thanks, Linda, for sharing that experience. Amber, can you speak to that?
Yes, I think that's so critical, because you hear a lot of times the phrase that's being thrown around is, you know, having people to do the work themselves. And I had so many people tell me over this past year, because I was quite vocal about everything. I'm very passionate about everything going on. And so many people would reach out and say, Amber, practice self-care, don't exhaust yourself. You know, it's not your job to go teaching everyone, you know, everything about the Black experience. And I totally get that, and I understand that, and I would really take those words to heart and make sure that I was doing what I needed to do to make sure I was okay mentally, emotionally, and everything, because it is draining. I mean, it's continued, you know, we're not past these things yet. The George Floyd trial has just started. There are a lot of things that can bring it up, but I think in addition to that, I just wanted to make sure people were aware of so many of the things that we face. And one of them that I talked about a lot was microaggressions, and getting people to understand all the little subtle remarks or comments they make that, or even actions that were really harmful. And I know one of the ones that I talk to a lot of coaching friends about in this profession is a Black woman, especially in the sport of volleyball with the demographic we coach. I am rarely, I have two assistants, a white male and a white female, and I am rarely, pretty much never assumed to be the head coach when we're out. You know, people don't come up to me when we always talk about being at restaurants and, you know, they bring the check at the end and say, who's in charge? They never come to me, you know, they always go to somewhere else. And as much as I would like to think that's because maybe they think I'm still a player, you know, I can pass. I also know that reality is that's probably not it. And that's kind of a little thing that we've just all gotten used to, but it also is, you know, why is that always assumed? I also have to make sure that in coaching, you know, we have to worry about making sure I don't want to come off as the angry Black woman. So I have to really be mindful about how I respond. You know, there's been situations I've watched some of my colleagues at my old school or just in general over the years talk to refs a specific way that I know I can't talk to them like. You know I can't act that way on the sideline, or I can't say these various things because it is going to be perceived much differently than some of my counterparts. So I think just all of those things are issues that so oftentimes we learn to kind of just deal. We learn that we have to be twice as good, you know, in some ways, and really trying to make sure that we are over competent and you know, doing our job just to make sure that we're judged fairly or judged, you know, well. And I think those are things that hopefully with this movement, people are becoming more mindful of, because I think the microaggressions are things, you know, people just kind of look over because they don't see them as the big issues. And really all of those harmful little mini things really do add up. So if we could all kind of just be more mindful of those, that's great. And I'll pretty much never stop trying to educate some people on those so we can be better.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Amber, for sharing that. Serena, how about you?
Amber and Linda did a great job, but the one thing I will say is that I wish people knew that, particularly this past year, that a lot of what we do, probably majority of what we do, has nothing to do with the physical part or what goes on the playing surface. A lot of, you know, especially this year with COVID and social justice, you talk about the mental health piece, nutrition, all that sort of stuff. A lot of what we do, probably even, I would say probably 75% of what we did this year had nothing to do with what was going on the playing surface. So I wish people would actually think a little bit more of that and know, you know, we do a lot more work than running around and shooting basketballs and things like that.
Absolutely. Thanks, Serena. I want to open it up here to the group if there are others who had things I wanted to share in terms of the experience of women working in sports. Yeah, Mary, go ahead.
Yeah, I'll add, Denver, you know, for most of us of a certain age, we were coached. There was a group of us early on that were coached by women because there were more women in coaching. Then there was this period during, predate you all, but there was this period in the early 80s when the NCAA started sponsoring championships for women. And even Florida was one of the few schools in the SEC that had a combined program. But when they combined program, there were fewer women administrators. We went through a period of time in the 80s and the 90s. And during that time, as more men got into our sport and other sports, now the players coming up have only been coached by men. They were coached by men in high school. They were coached by men in our club. They're coached by men in college. And for females to think, is coaching actually something I might consider when all they've seen is men? Not going to happen very often. And so what women had to do is you go into coaching and your mentor is a male. And the biggest mistake, and I wish more women during that time understood, if a female tries to act like a male, it doesn't work. You have to be your authentic self. And as a female, you must embrace that as a female, this is how I see the world. This is my lens. and not try to be somebody I'm not. And that's not easy when you've only been coached by men and you are surrounded by men, and the most successful coaches are men, and you think that's how you have to act. And so I think it is hopefully changing as we get more former players like Amber. And by the way, that's her jersey hanging up on her wall behind her, which of course only makes like my heart swell with pride. But more former players like Amber. And I'll just use this moment to say, we can identify, and Becky can attest to this, we know who is going to make a great coach. And you know who that is? It's the ones that were great teammates. The better the teammate, the better chance they're going to make a great coach like Amber.
Yeah.
Thanks, Mary, for that.
Denver, if I'll jump in real quick and just, you know, my experience is a little bit different than everybody in the panel. My involvement in sports is not so much on the field, but maybe surrounding sports as a fundraiser, particularly fundraiser in athletics. So, you know, during my time at Florida, I was really lucky that both teams trained together. And so, you know, everybody was sort of on the same status. And if anything, it made us better, right? So we wanted to beat the guys, and the guys didn't want to let us beat them. And it just made all of us as swimmers much better individuals and teammates and competitors, and really challenged ourselves to be better. So I was really lucky to have that set up because everything was transparent. Everybody had the same thing, and we had the same coaches, and they were all tough on all of us equally. It didn't matter what your gender was. So that really triggered a lot of internal desire and management of yourself and how you pushed yourself forward. I found that to be incredibly helpful because it didn't matter what the field was, including in fundraising, where the career that I chose, because at the end of the day, if you've got a good compass internally, you're confident in yourself, as Mary said, you know, you are who you are. You can't, you know, you're a woman, you can't be a man or something different, right? So just be who you are, own it, and be confident. And I think that training at Florida really helped me solidify really who I was and how I woke up every morning choosing to be and pushing forward. So in terms of a career for women in sports, I've been fortunate to be the head of fundraising, you know, at the University of Maryland. I was the senior athletic director for advancement and the chief development officer there. And what's really interesting is, you know, you think about men in that profession and you go down the path of, you know, the locker room visits after football games. Well, you know, particularly I was never interested in going into a locker room of a bunch of sweaty people after a victory or a defeat. So that never really appealed to me, but there's a clear barrier there. But maybe the donors that are associated with sports, they tend to be men because that's the thing, right? And maybe much to our mistake, right? That we don't involve spouses or women in those conversations or those invitations. But it was pretty intimidating, I have to tell you, at Maryland, being in that position when, you know, you go out to donor dinners or to certain events and it's the guys, right? It's the guys with a cigar in their hand and a whiskey glass in the other. And hey, you know what? I can sip bourbon or scotch like a champ, right? But it's funny because it raises an eyebrow like, oh, okay, she's hanging with us. And so it was my job. You know, you stand walking into some of those meetings or some of those social events, oftentimes being the only woman there or one of very few women there. And so how you carry yourself and that ability to sort of step in and own it, you're in the job, right? You're in the chair. You're the head of development at a major institution, own it. You're not there to be one of the guys, you're there to do a job, you're there to connect them better with their institution, and understanding that role and being confident and stepping into those shoes really makes a difference. And it's like everything in life, right? If you're comfortable with it, everybody around you is comfortable with it. But it was it's pretty heady to have to be the one to carry that responsibility for an institution when you look very different than everybody else in the room. And, you know, Mary, you'll appreciate this. Going back to my time at the University of Florida as a staff member, one of my jobs was to take Steve Spurrier around the state to talk to our Gator Club, our alumni chapters. he was really interesting because he had huge respect for women. If any of the guys, coaches, or members of the Alumni Association staff said anything of color or what he thought was inappropriate, he'd be the first to correct them. And so I think he was so ahead of his years, I think, in understanding and respecting women in sport. That made it really easy for me to observe from him how he dealt with it in a way that was palatable and digestible. And then, by the way, whatever Steve Spurrier said, we all kind of did anyways. But he was very, very kind. The other lesson I learned on those trips is, when you're the only woman in a van full of guys, there's always jokes and there's always, funny quips here and there. And it's understanding how to balance who you are as a woman in those roles, right? So if there were jokes that were sort of inappropriate, not saying that any of them did, but if you laugh too hard, you're weird. If you don't laugh at all, you're weird. So how do you sort of straddle that fence so that you're part of the group and you're connecting with people without feeling inappropriate either to them or to yourself? It's not easy. And so I go back to what Mary said, you just have to be yourself and own it. And by the way, if you don't like it, oftentimes it's best to leave things unsaid and just know that that's not people that you're going to hang around with and to make a huge statement, because oftentimes that just cuts you off from being part of those circles that are required to do what you do. Anyway, I'll stop here, but a lot of lessons they're just a little bit different than being a coach or an administrator.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much, Veronica. Becky, can you expand and expound?
Yeah, I think people have said some really great comments, but to kind of come full circle from what Linda started talking about is about the ability to understand that, from a gender standpoint, like there's no such thing really, I think, as like a gender role. I mean, I know that people talk about that, but I think that I wish people could understand that, women can be badasses and be direct and, do what they need to do. And men can be really comforting and compassionate. And it's not a gender issue. Like, those are just roles that you have to deal with within your day-to-day life as a coach or an administrator or anything else that you are. And that we shouldn't necessarily, be judged as any of those things based on our gender. And, you've seen it probably on social media where like some of the assistant coaches, especially, or even some of the Black coaches in some of the predominantly Black sports where it says more than a recruiter, because people are put in those roles because, oh, they're a good connector to people, or, oh, she's Black, so she can get us Black players. I think that stuff that's not, if I'm white, I should be able to connect to Black players and be able to recruit Black players to my school. If I'm a woman coaching a men's sport, then I need to be able to connect to men's players and be able to get them to come to my school. So I think those gender roles just kind of need to dissolve and become a little bit less black and white and more on a spectrum.
Thanks, Becky. Amber, did you have something there? I saw you respond. Okay, you're good. All right. I'm going to go a little bit off script with this question because I want to build on something that I heard several of you saying just in terms of representation and seeing someone in those roles. Can someone maybe address what, whether how you view yourself in terms of, being representation, or how you saw someone as you came up as representation in terms of, seeing someone who looks like you or is like you in a certain role? Is there anyone who might be able to touch on that a little bit?
Denver, I'll start off. As I was listening to Veronica, she made such a powerful statement that, during her time as an athlete here, her experience and, going head to head with men, she knew that she could do any of those things. I graduated from an HBCU. And so, the majority of my professors were African-American. And you leave that place, that there is nothing you can't do. And so you think about what message you would like to convey to young women, women of color. If nothing else, when you walk into a room, know that you belong there. If you've not been given an opportunity, know that opportunity will come. You know, a lot of people, when we step into those, you know, high powered jobs, we may not be fully prepared, but we're going to be prepared when it's time for us to do the job. But you got to feel that you can get there and represent that position well. And so I think sometimes women are like, I don't think I'm good enough. And there's a lot of self-doubt, and we end up not pursuing or doing the things that we really want to do. So just know that I belong and I can do whatever it is that I set my mind to. I think Veronica's point really brought that home when she talked about her experience as a student athlete.
Thanks, Kim. Anybody? Yeah, go ahead, Mary.
Very well put, Kim. From a personal standpoint, when I took this job, I had a 2-year-old, and I knew what my aspirations were. And this is going to come full circle, Veronica, because you came here and you saw all the success, especially in the women's programs like swimming and golf and tennis. And I wanted to win. And I looked around the country, and there was not a single female head coach married with kids in the top 30. Maybe not top, I mean, nowhere. So there wasn't anybody I could ask, how are you doing? How do you manage? How do you make it happen? But maybe, and here's the part, Veronica, maybe the greatest sense of self-confidence that I gained early on was from Steve Spurrier, because true story, he gave me his copy of the book, The Art of War, that he believed in, his coaching philosophy from The Art of War, and he let me read it. And you could see where he highlighted, and it was like an insight into Steve Spurrier's mind. But what it did for me is the guy, the most successful football coach in the country, saw me, just as you said, as an equal. He wanted to talk coaching with me. And it gave in that, and earlier you talked about, you never know what you might have been, Becky, you said, in terms of conversation. I'm sure at that time, it's the ball coach talking shop. That's Steve. But what he did for me in terms of my self-confidence, like, okay, I don't see anybody else raising kids and having, you know, coaching a top 10 team, but why not? Because I now have Steve Spurrier's secrets, so I can do it.
That's incredible.
Yeah, Denver, if I can, on
Yeah.
the representation issue, because I do think, you know, to Kim's point, there is a lot that's conveyed without any words when you see someone doing something that you aspire to. And one of the things I really appreciate about all the women that are on this call and so many across the country is I think we're keenly aware of what that means. And I know so many women that will go out of their way to play, to mentor, to be in that representative role in a positive way. So we have an event here for female student athletes. And we bring in people from all over the country. These women, like, they volunteer their time. You know, they're not paid. They pay their own travel. They come in because they want to be around young women. And if nothing else, even if it's not a career connection, it's our, student athletes here, female student athletes can see someone else who has excelled in their career. And so the thing I appreciate about so many women in this business is they understand that they may not have had someone doing their job that they could emulate, but they sure as hell are going to be that person for someone else. And just the camaraderie and the willingness to put themselves out there is, it's awesome to watch it. This event happens to be this really great example, but it happens all over the country. And I just think women are appreciative of the fact that maybe I didn't have that, but I'm going to make sure that women coming up do.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Linda. Let's move on. I want to talk a little bit about what changes you think could improve women's experience in the field of sports, and what gives you hope as you look forward to the future. Becky, can you start us off there?
Sure. It was really funny. We have a younger woman on our staff, and she's been going through the interview process as an assistant coach. And so recently, this was, in the last 6 months, she was offered a job as an assistant coach. And one of the benefits was a golf club membership. And, not that that's a bad thing. That's not a gendered thing. Men or women both play golf, but like, she does not play golf, and it was not something that was attracting her to the job. And I think just the fact that there was no thought of like, well, maybe we could tailor this to the person that we're offering the job to, as opposed to this blanket, hey, you can have a golf membership if you take this job. And I think things like that are, again, it's just like evaluating them from a different perspective. So instead of saying like what we've always done, or this worked with the last candidate, or whatever it is, it's like, could we look at it from a more universal view of things that might help people? Like we talk about it all the time, Mary and I, especially about like retaining and getting women into the coaching field. And I'm not saying a golf membership might be a very attractive thing to some people, but like a daycare membership, that would probably be like awesome, things, just thinking differently outside the box. But I do think, Linda mentioned it, like the Stay in the Game event and the programming that we've done at Florida for the women athletes, to see that they have people, like they can see people like Kim and Linda like every single day. And then they can interact with people, like Val at the Hawkins Center, or people that they see doing jobs that they could then do. And I can't say enough how much that inspires people, without maybe Kim ever having a conversation with any of our players. There are kids on our team who definitely would look at that role and be like, whoa, like that's something I could do. And I think that change in just the fact that the representation has changed in some ways, it can always get better, but the fact that it's changed in some ways, I think is a really bright spot for the future of athletics.
Thanks, Becky. Linda?
Yeah, sort of to that point, I think, it's the, I think we were more open, and maybe COVID helped push us along here in focusing less on the hows the work is getting done as opposed to the outcomes. And so, when I first started here, if you weren't pulling up at 7:45 in the morning and your light, went off before 5:30 in the evening, you just felt a lot of pressure around, having this very conventional, doing the job like other people have done it. And I think some very promising things have happened where I feel like we're moving more towards outcomes. So however a coach is going to structure their work and their recruiting, at the end, it's the outcome. And if that means they carve out time to have dinner with their families, or, there's some time off for a family vacation, or the kids are in the gym, whatever it is, I think we have evolved to being more open to maybe some less rigid focus on how, and more looking at the results, because the results are really good. And if you give people, really driven people, the opportunity to do the work the way that suits them best, you're going to get the best outcomes, and just providing some support there. So I think we're getting there. And that's my hope, really, that maybe COVID gave us a nice shove to be more open to outcomes as opposed to everybody doing the work the same way.
Go ahead, Mary.
If I can add, Denver, Linda gets a ton of credit for this, because she started this way early when she got here, about what do we need to provide for our coaches, our trainers, to keep them in the game, in this profession, and to look at it just because we've always done it this way doesn't mean that has to be the only way. And I think about women, Amber, you're going to come back and you're going to doubt me when you do get married and have kids and go, now, how was I supposed to do this? Because it is not easy. There is no way in any profession is it easy. But my take is, if ADs and CEOs and presidents will just stay the course with women as they're going through, as they're having kids, stay the course. But let me tell you what moms do of young kids. They learn to get more stuff done before 8 a.m. than probably all of your employees combined. I guarantee the organizational skills it takes for moms to get kids dressed into school and fed and everything that's required of it. And I know Denver dads too, but truly so much of it falls on moms. Just hang with them, because when their kids are in school and it get a little bit later, these women are going to be freaking rock stars in your company, but you just can't give up on them during those tough years.
That's incredible. Thank you, Mary. Go ahead, Amber.
I was just going to say, adding to so much of all the great things that have been said, having those opportunities for women, helping them stay in the game, like you guys have talked about, and just increasing those numbers. I can't stress enough, like you said, Denver, how that representation helps bring more. Because, you know, like I talked about earlier, my conversation with Mary and seeing her master the whole wife, mother, awesome head coach job, helped lead me to where I am today. When I was working in women's administration, it was watching Linda. You know, I'm looking around doing a graduate kind of research study on all the SWAs in the country. And I keep looking at these real life examples that I have that I get to go work with every day with her and every day with Kim, and seeing not just women, but 2 Black women, you know, at kind of the top of the level in in college administration. And that made me feel confident that this is somewhere I can be and I can belong as well. And I think that's one thing that's really exciting for the younger generation coming up. And I think someone mentioned it earlier, just making sure, one, we're in 2021 and we're still having all kinds of firsts. You know, there's always a first person to do this, first person to do that. And, you know, which is always great. But I think one of the added kind of responsibilities that person has is making sure they're not the last, and making sure that they can open that door, open that table to more people. I love what you guys have done, you know, in the UAA, of just trying to expand those opportunities, mentorship opportunities, to keep people in the game, to keep people in this field, because that's the only way that people are going to be able to see, I can do this, you know, I can have it all, I don't have to be confined to these gender roles, and I'm able to accomplish this because I have so many people that I've got to see before me accomplish it. And, you know, there's an age-old mantra of you can't be what you can't see. And that's something that a lot of people really use when talking about representation. And I think you can be those things. We've seen it happen a lot. Otherwise, there would be no first. But it definitely makes it a lot easier when you have that person that you can look to. And better yet, when you have that person you can actually call or email and reach out to, and they're willing to help show you the way.
Yeah. Denver, if I could add real quick, and Amber, that was super powerful. You know, I think I was pretty lucky at Florida to have 2 female mentors that really, I think, set me down a really great professional path. One of them was my internship director at Gator Boosters, Sarah Brazda. That name may sound familiar to many of you. And then Anne-Marie Rogers, who was in your position beforehand. You know, she has a special place in my heart. But both of them were really terrific in terms of leading by example. And I remember, as I reflect on, you know, portions of my career, you know, as you move up and have more responsibility, or given more responsibility, and all of a sudden you're managing people. I remember one day I was so frustrated sitting in the office, and I thought, gosh, you know, I just remember those days at Gator Boosters, or when I was interning in Marie's office, and things just clicked. You know, I loved that environment, and I loved how they managed, and I love how, you know, we were all empowered to try different things, and, you know, nothing was silly. You just tried it. And if it was better, that's what we did. And it dawned on me for a second, like, wait a minute, you know, as you move up, as I moved up, there's less and less layers above your head. And I turned around one day, it's like, well, there's nobody else to really sort of create that environment for you. You should be creating it for yourself and for others around you, and others who now work for you. And that was such an aha moment in my career, and that I was so frustrated. And after a while, it's like, you know what? It doesn't matter what level you are. So where you are in the org chart, how you own your space and how you deal with people influences those around you, but especially as you are in leadership positions, like all of you are, you know, after a while, there's nobody else to create that environment for you. It's on you to do it for you and do it for others around you, or at least to influence that behavior with colleagues and teammates. Some may follow, some may not, but everybody's watching. That's the one. I mean, I remember you all, you know, when we were all, you know, freshmen in college, there wasn't anything that we missed. You might have not talked about it, but all those experiences are there. You soak it all up, and that kind of makes you who you are. But I did want to share that, you know, and that after a while, it's really you. And you have the power to create that environment, create that experience for yourself and for those around you. And I was really grateful to both of them for being such great examples of what a great workplace could be like.
Thanks, Veronica. I want to build real quickly as we're starting to run short on time, but Linda, you made the point about shifting the focus to outcomes and less so the how. And in this field, we're at a place where we're still in the first and second generation of women in really strong roles within athletics. So in what ways does that added perspective, and to touch on, to bring in what Mary said about the incredible skills that that women bring to the field, and in many cases moms bring to the field. I guess what I'm getting at is talk to me a little bit maybe about how the women are just such an incredible asset to any organization, and particularly to an athletics organization. Or did I just make my own point there?
No, it was a good one, Denver. And I think, and I'd be particularly interested, with Serena and Amber being less tenured. I'm avoiding saying older, that we're older, Mary and Becky and Kim, but less tenured. But it is, to Veronica's point, you're sort of in charge of creating your own environment here. And so, and sometimes you have to do that even when it's uncomfortable. And really, everyone cares what other people think. Like you don't not care, but you have to feel strongly enough about what you're doing to sort of plow ahead and force the outcomes conversation versus the process. So, for example, for some of us, that has meant taking our kids to school in the morning, which means, my work schedule will start once I have dropped my kids off at school. I chose not to have somebody else do that. It meant there are certain times, I could not have an 8 o'clock in the morning meeting because I was committed to taking my kids to school in the morning. It's a small thing, but it can, cause some uncomfortable disruptions. And can't you just once, at the end, that's something that was a priority, and the work will flow around it, and we all got it done. And over time, that empowered someone else to say, maybe I'm going to take my kids to school in the morning, or maybe, every other Wednesday I'm going to have lunch with them, or, whatever it is, whatever that fallout is or the outcome is. But it's believing enough in what you're trying to accomplish for yourself, and letting go of other people's perceptions of how you're doing the work, and feeling, we kept talking about just empowered enough. I'm going to take this step. I know the value of my work, and hopefully the organization will bend enough to allow all of us to have that kind of a space. And I think we've all found that here in some way, but you need to push sometimes a little bit.
Thanks, Linda. All right, is there anything else before we leave it here? Want to make sure we don't leave any wisdom unheard here before we let everybody go. Awesome. Well, I want to thank so much all the panelists today for sharing their experiences, their wisdom with us. Thank you to all of you who took the time out of your day to hear from everybody. We have some incredible women in sports, here at the UAA. My favorite woman in sports is here in the UAA, my wife, Megan Parler. So I just, I appreciate so much all the wisdom you all have to share with us. Thanks so much, and have a great day, and go Gators.